Hi everyone, welcome to another Reasons and Resources episode. So for this episode we're moving on to Clojure. So as always I'll go through some of the reasons why you might want to learn Clojure, both in terms of reasons why I wanted to learn it and continue to want to explore it, and also reasons that are out there on the internet or in books as to try and encourage people to learn Clojure. And then we'll look at some of the main resources that you can start off with, and then you can sort of go out from there. So I think the easiest thing to do is to talk about why I learnt Clojure, why I continue to want to delve deeper into it. And I think the first really impetus for doing it was something I mentioned before, the Stack Overflow survey. And around 2019 was when I started really engaging with the survey, looking at it, looking at some of the stats. And what I did notice was that in terms of the top paying languages, I'd noticed that Clojure was featuring quite highly, consistently, year on year for a number of years. So that was a sort of thing that piqued my interest. As I delved deeper, using the Wikipedia article, I noticed that it was a dialect of Lisp. So Lisp is a language that I was aware of, very old language, one of probably the original programming languages from back in the day, alongside things like Algol and Fortran and COBOL and things like that. But it was one of the languages from back in the day which I'd bought a reprint of an early Lisp book. And so I thought, well, maybe Clojure might give me a sort of shoe-in to, learning Lisp. So that was the second personal reason. And the third one was that it was on the JVM. So I'd started to get interested in programming languages that ran on virtual machines. So, Java runs on the Java virtual machine. So I then started to get interested in, what other languages? And there's quite a number of languages that run on the JVM. Now, beyond that, in terms of the sort of things that come up, on the web, as to what might encourage you to learn the language. Well, one is that it's a very powerful functional programming language. So if functional programming, like me, is a rabbit hole you want to explore further or revisit, then that might provide, again, some sort of encouragement, some impetus to do that. And you get to look at, immutable data and pure functions, those sort of things. Secondly, might be something like the interoperability with Java. Because it's running on the JVM, you can easily incorporate Java libraries and frameworks. So you can sort of leverage that pre-existing Java ecosystem if you want to. There may be concurrency reasons. Maybe you're interested in understanding a little bit more about concurrency and learning about how that manifests itself in Clojure and how that can contribute to making it easier to write concurrent and parallel applications. Another thing, you might be drawn in by the particular syntax that Clojure uses because it's based on Lisp. It has a certain look to it when you're using it. And I'm sure as we go through and look at some of the resources, we'll see examples of that syntax. So concise, expressive, makes you think in a different way as well, the way it's laid out. You'll see why if you, as you start to explore something like Clojure. And then finally, it's another one of these languages where there's a pretty rich ecosystem. There's a community, so there's a lot of libraries, tools there that can help, support you. You've got something like Unintentional, I think it's pronounced, for project management as well. So it's got its own little development ecosystem and tool chain that I found really interesting to play around with and use. So those might be some of the reasons why you might want to learn Clojure. And I'll include links to with the Wikipedia article for Clojure, and then in that you can sort of look at the design of the language and things like the impact as well, if you're curious about that. So purely from a programming in a professional environment reason for learning it, if we take a look at, as I regularly do, this year's Stack Overflow survey. So first up, let's just look at the most popular technologies and see where it occurs on that list. So this is an answer to the question on the survey: which programming, scripting and markup languages have you done extensive development work in over the past year, and which do you want to work in over the next year? And as we go down the list, where do we find Clojure? Is it fairly low down? Interesting. Oh, there it is, yeah. So pretty low there. So then we'll move on to this one that always fascinates me: admired and desired. So just so we're clear here, because it can be a bit tricky to interpret this. So which programming, scripting and markup languages have you done extensive development work in over the past year, and which do you want to work in over the next year? And you can see the desired value is in blue, the admired value is in red. So again, if we go down, here's Clojure, another one where there's quite a wide gap between the desired and the admired, and there might be a few reasons why that's the case. I'm not quite sure which one is it. It looks like it's one of the wider ones actually from this. So certainly this is pretty wide. Looks like Elixir is pretty wide as well there. And then finally, top paying technologies. So once again, it's up there with Erlang, Elixir, there's Clojure, Nim, Ruby, Perl, and so on. So there we go. So let's look at the resources. So we've got the main Clojure website, so I'll include a link to that. And then as we drill down through it, there's a reader for Clojure. So, you can go through, and this is a great way of familiarizing yourself with the language. If you don't want to use a book, as I've said on numerous occasions, it's always my preferred version to have some sort of book, if I can, a physical copy of one of the sort of main books on the language. If not, then a digital copy, but certainly something that resembles an old-fashioned book. Now, as we look at this, you can sort of get a clue as to what the language might look like, or what the language looks like here. You can see as well several of the examples are using the REPL. And then we've got the actual getting started guide. So this explains, how to work with the tools, how to set them up. It provides this REPL, then bits about how to learn the language. So a nice set of lists of books here. Practice problems. Exercism again has one, and we'll look at that at the end. Where can you ask questions? A little bit about companies that use it. So that's always really interesting if you're looking to work in a specific domain or a specific firm, is to see, okay, what languages are they using and how are they using it? Now, obviously, you have to drill down a bit deeper and, look into, well, are they still using this as well? But it's interesting to see, like, who's using it and how they're using it. And, of course, also, like, why are they using it? There's some extended list of books here as well. There is quite a number of books on Clojure. The one I've got is... I'm trying to remember actually now. I think I might have that one. Yeah, I get a bit confused sometimes because when I did this initially, I learned Clojure. It was when when I had a subscription to the O'Reilly digital archive, and so I was reading multiple books on Clojure at the time, mostly digitally, but I did buy a physical copy of one of the books, and that's why I'm having trouble remembering without my bookshelf being right in front of my face. But I'm pretty sure it was this one here. There's one up here that comes up quite a bit. Clojure for the Brave and True. And then we've also got a gentle introduction to the basics of Clojure. If you don't want to sort of go full tilt into the reader to start with, you can sort of start off here, learn a bit about the syntax, dabble around in the REPL, maybe start creating some files. As you know, with these programming languages, what I often do is set it up for use in Visual Studio Code. However, I think when I do get around to revisiting REPL, probably going to use it again exclusively in its own IDE and project management environment, because I found that really convenient at the time to do that. So in terms of videos, we've got Clojure TV, and we've got quite a recent post on here from a month ago, so it is still being posted to, which is good. So I'll include a link to that. Then we've got some community resources, which was very handy. You can see there's quite a number of forums and Discord channels and Twitter and stuff like that. And you can also see a number of the resources are sort of duplicated here. We've got this as well. And sure enough, if you do want to just go through Clojure for the Brave and True and you don't want to buy it, then you can. It's available online. Again, with these, you have to bear in mind that sometimes the authors like to use a certain development environment over something else. So, be aware of that. But yeah. And then we have the Clojure track on exorcism. I really enjoy using this site. What you'll notice with this particular site is if you go through different languages, then you may see the same things come up again and again. So when you're in the basics, for instance, for Clojure, if you've done other stuff, then you might notice that the learning exercise and the challenge it is the same across multiple languages, which I find quite nice to be able to do. So like how to solve different problems across multiple languages, I think it's actually quite useful, and you can sort of see how to plays to the various strengths and weaknesses in there. So you can see this one actually bounces out to the website. They've integrated external learning quite nicely with this. So here's our learning exercise, cars assemble. We can go through there, learn how to do that particular aspect that's relevant to that. And then finally, shameless plug, if you haven't checked it out already, I do have Clojure as a page on my Programming Polyglot website. So I go through and the different, using the categories that are sort of set out in the Programming Language Explorations book, which has a chapter of Clojure in it, and there's actually another reason why I wanted to revisit Clojure, because there was a Clojure chapter. So I've got sections on the usual things, all the other languages on this WordPress site art. So the binding and scope in the language, functions and closures in Clojure, frames and argument passing, prototypes and classes, extensions, dispatch, operators, what they look like in the language, control flow, matching. That's interesting to see how that manifests itself in different languages. Type inference, how that's handled, immutability, persistent structures. A lot of these are interrelated, so a lot of the examples are sort of variations on a theme, but each section should be fairly self-contained. So if you wanted to dive in and just think about processes and threads in, say, Clojure, you can. There's a bit about agents there. Messaging, again, a lot of the stuff towards the end of these sections, just by what they are, tend to be quite interconnected. Synchronization, and pointers and garbage collection. Where some languages automatically have garbage collection anyway, and you don't have to remember to do it. So I always sort of discuss whether that's the case, and if it does have garbage collection, and you're just interested in seeing how that cleans things up, then some of my examples have examples where you can actually view the amount of available memory before and after the automated garbage collection, or if you force it to do one as well. So you can play around with that. In a lot of languages, it's quite interesting to see that in action. And then a bit about metaprogramming. And that's always really interesting, because metaprogramming is often quite different in different languages. How that's done, how that turns up, and the way in which it's used. So hopefully that was a useful set of reasons and resources to learn Clojure. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.